Hello and welcome back to another installment of Beantown vs. Big Apple Sports. My name is Nico Levasseur, and I'm joined once again by my co-hosts Reed Becker and Alex Green. Today we'll be discussing the Boston Celtics, Brooklyn Nets, and New York Knicks as the second half of the season gets underway. Starting with the Nets, Reed, what moves did the Nets make at the trade deadline? How do you think they do in the second half of the season?
Yeah, so the Nets made a blockbuster trade with the Philadelphia 76ers trading James Harden and Paul Millsap to Philly for Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, and 2 first-round picks. So I believe that the Nets got the better end of this deal because they got a good return for Harden, who had no interest in being in Brooklyn, and would have left in free agency, and they would have lost him for nothing. Brooklyn gets Simmons, who, if available and is in shape, is a good defender and can drive to the basket. While he can't shoot, the Nets do not need him to do that when they'll, hypothetically thinking, they'll have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving back, assuming New York City lifts the vaccine mandate. And then adding Curry gives Brooklyn another threat to shoot from behind the arc, which they have been lacking with Joe Harris out. And then lastly, the Nets got Andre Drummond, who is a big man that they also desperately needed. I'm not a fan of Harden, though, getting himself out of 2 consecutive situations, and I guarantee he will not win with the Sixers this season. Looking at for the Nets going forward, though, they are certainly a better built team. And if or when KD and Kyrie are fully back, and if Simmons is able to take the court, they are another threat to come out of the East, and probably one of the favorites, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, the Nets, even though they gave up the better player in that deal, arguably, in James Harden, I think the return they got made them a much better and much deeper team. You talk about Seth Curry, he's going to bring some nice shooting to that team. And that starting lineup, when fully healthy, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons, that's a pretty nice big three right there. So I agree. I think the Nets could be a top threat in the East.
And looking at it from the Philly perspective, you get Harden, we know what Harden can do if he has interest in even being there. But he's improving on defense, but not known for it in his career. And if you look at it just a couple nights ago against Boston, throughout the season, really, the Sixers have missed Ben Simmons' defense, and now they won't get that at all. And Doc Rivers, we know his playoff history, so I think the Nets clearly got the better end.
Yeah, from my perspective, I felt like it was a smart trade for the Nets. It seems like Harden wanted out of Brooklyn, and the Nets got a good package in return for him. Staying in New York, Reed, what moves did the Knicks make, and how will they fare in the second half of the season? Tell us.
Yeah, so the Knicks have been inconsistent, to say the least, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but they did not make any moves at the trade deadline, although it seems understandable since no one in the league wanted their players. Julius Randle has continued to be inconsistent, and their defense has been nowhere close to what it was last season, as they are currently 16th in the league under their defensive rating category. There's also been a report that the Knicks are going to buy out the rest of Kemba Walker's contract in the coming days. Overall, though, the Knicks need to shift their attention to playing more minutes to the young guys as they can evaluate their future or who they should stay and who should be going. They will be lucky if they're able to get into play-in tournament, and that also plays into the fact of what we saw when this recording took place last night, blowing a 28-point lead to their rival across the river, to the Brooklyn Nets. And I'll just say this, that shows just what I just said about needing the younger guys to play, because Julius Randle has no place being number one guy anymore, and people are starting to blame Thibodeau, but I think it's just more of how the team was built. I don't think it's Thibodeau's fault, because he was still the head coach last time I checked when they were the 4 seed. And were in the playoffs last season. So
yeah, you talk about last season, they were a 4 seed last year, and now they're not even going to make the play-in. So I think that's a really big drop-off. And Julius Randle played in the MVP caliber type season last year, and he's just been super inconsistent, like you mentioned, Reed. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Knicks finish out the season if they were able to make the play-in tournament.
Big drop-off, and granted they're missing Barrett right now, as well as Derrick Rose, who they desperately need, and we saw late in last night's game when this was recorded. But also, in terms of Julius Randle, he's not the number one guy anymore. And to me, he doesn't fit New York, what New York is made of. I don't think he can handle New York. I think he has to get out of here as soon as possible.
Yeah, I agree. The Knicks haven't been doing that well. I'm kind of surprised that they're going to buy out Kemba's contract. It will be interesting to see if any team picks him up. Finally, Alex, did the Celtics make any moves at the deadline, and how could they play in the second half of the season?
So the Celtics were one of the more active teams on trade deadline day as they made multiple trades. The first one they made was they sent Josh Richardson, Romeo Langford, and a 2022 first-round pick to the Spurs for Derek White. And White, who was under contract for 3 years, can be a big help to the Celtics bench unit. He has already come in and had some success in the six-man role. And White is a guy who gives you a little bit of everything and can be a much-needed spark plug for the Celtics. And then the other trade the Celtics made, they acquired former big man Daniel Tice from the Rockets for Dennis Schroeder, Bruno Fernando, and NS Freedom. And I know a lot of Celtics fans are not a huge fan of Tice, but I think he is an improvement over both Fernando and Freedom. And even though his contract is a bit high, he should be a decent bench big for the Celtics as he was fairly successful with them in the past. And you look at the game against the Sixers that Reed mentioned a couple minutes ago for the Nets trade. Tice had 4 blocks in that game. I know their Sixers were playing like their bench unit a little bit in the fourth quarter, and that's when the majority of the blocks came. But still, just getting 4 blocks against a quality team like the Sixers is a good sign for Tyson and what he's going to bring to the team for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I'll just say this with the Celtics. I think a lot of people were really excited with the big Celtics winning streak they had until they had granted a back-to-back and had a terrible outing against Detroit last night. But I'll just say this about the Celtics. I think the reason they had their big winning streak was outside of playing, I'll give them Philly and looking at the schedule, Denver. For the most part, they were playing terrible teams. So I'm not totally sold on this sample size quite yet of how long that could go into the playoffs. I still think Brooklyn will be a big problem for them. I think Philadelphia could be 50-50. So I'm not going to jump the gun yet with the Sixers yet.
I mean, looking at the Celtics schedule, you can't really blame them because you just have to play the teams that are on your schedule. You can't really, make any excuses or just any. You can't really blame the Celtics for who they have on their schedule at the time. So it was just good to see them actually winning those games that they were losing earlier in the season. And I think Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have both been playing at a better level, and obviously the trades that they made, I think, should help them heading into the second half of the season.
We'll see. Come playoff time, the game slows down, and when it comes to that situation, I think we'll get back to that. I think there will be another talking point when you turn on WEEI in the Sports Hub of can they play together, but we'll see.
Yeah, it seems to me anything can happen. Yeah, I feel like the Celtics have made some good moves at the deadline. I think the players that they got should make the team better. And I'm happy to see Daniel Tice back because he was one of my favorite players on the Celtics. That's all the time we have for today. Join us next time on Beantown vs. Big Apple Sports. Thanks for watching.